Welcome to The Last Calm Word. Let us get started with today's story. I was blowing out the candles when my phone buzzed against my leg, and by the time the smoke curled up past the little paper crown my daughter had made me, I had already watched 11 seconds of a video that took my whole life apart. Everyone was singing. My wife had her hand on my shoulder, her wedding ring catching the light, her voice the loudest in the room, and on the screen in my lap, under the table where nobody could see, she was in a hotel room I didn't recognize, laughing at something a man was saying, and the man was her ex. Happy birthday to me. I want to tell you exactly how this happened, and I want to tell you what my 6-year-old daughter said an hour later that made the video feel like the small problem, because if you've ever thought you knew someone all the way down to the bone, you need to hear how wrong a person can be. My name doesn't matter. Call me the guy who thought he had it good. I was turning 39 that night. We were in the house I paid for, the house Claire picked out 4 years ago because it had the big kitchen and the yard for Lily to run in, and Claire had spent 2 weeks planning this party. That's what I kept coming back to later. She planned it. She hung the streamers herself. She ordered the cake I liked, the one with the dark chocolate that most people find too bitter, because she knew I loved it. She invited my brother and his wife, and 2 guys from my crew, and her sister, and a handful of the neighbors, and she stood in our kitchen at 7 that morning frosting cupcakes while Lily helped. And I watched her from the doorway and thought, I am the luckiest man I know. Hold that picture, because I need you to understand that nothing about that morning looked like a lie. That's the part nobody prepares you for. The lie doesn't wear a costume. It frosts cupcakes. It kisses your forehead. It tells your daughter to go wake up, Daddy, because the pancakes are ready. The video came from a number I didn't have saved. Just a gray bubble, no name, no message, only the little thumbnail with a play arrow over it. I almost didn't open it. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I've thought about it every single day since. I almost put the phone back in my pocket. I was at my own birthday party. My daughter was 2 feet away, with cake on her chin. If I had waited 20 more minutes, if I had opened it in the bathroom, if I had done 100 small things differently, the night would have gone a different way. But I opened it under the table because I'm a man and my thumb moved before my brain did. And there was Claire, my Claire, in a bathrobe that wasn't ours, sitting on the edge of a bed, and a man's arm reaching into the frame to hand her a glass of wine. He said something I couldn't hear over the singing. She threw her head back and laughed the way she used to laugh with me, back before the laugh got shorter and more polite, and then she leaned over and kissed him, slow, comfortable, like she'd done it 1,000 times, because she had. I know she had. You can see it in the way 2 people move when it isn't new. There was nothing frantic about it, nothing guilty. It was a Tuesday to them, and the whole time my family was singing happy birthday, and the candles were still smoking, and my wife's hand was warm on my shoulder. I don't remember standing up. My brother told me later that I went white and put the phone face down and said I needed some air, and that I smiled when I said it, which is the thing that scares me most. That some animal part of me knew to smile. I went out to the yard. It was June, and still light out at 8, that gold hour that makes everything look like a memory before it's even over. And I stood by the fence where Lily's swing set was, and I watched my own hands shake. Claire came out a few minutes later. She had her cardigan pulled around her and 2 beers, and she handed me one, and she said, "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." And I looked at her. I looked at my wife's face, the face I had woken up next to for 6 years, the face I had watched turn red and exhausted and beautiful in a hospital room while she pushed our daughter into the world. And I said, "Yeah, just tired, long week." And she smiled and clinked her bottle against mine and said, "Almost 40, old man," and went back inside to cut the cake. And I stood in the yard and made a decision that I want to be honest with you about, because it wasn't a noble one. I decided not to blow it up right then, not because I'm a good man, because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, I would say something I couldn't take back in front of my daughter, and I was afraid that once the words were out, the life I had would be gone, and even ruined, even poisoned. It was still the only life I knew. So I went back inside. I ate a slice of the cake she made me. I watched my daughter fall asleep in her chair with frosting in her hair, and I carried her up to bed. And my wife stood in the doorway of the party she threw for me, and watched me do it, and said, "You're such a good dad." And I have replayed that sentence so many times it's worn smooth. You're such a good dad. That was the night it started. The slow, quiet unraveling, and I need to tell you the next part carefully, because this is where it stopped being about a video and became about something I never saw coming. It was after 11. The guests were gone. Claire was downstairs loading the dishwasher. And I went into Lily's room to check on her the way I do every night, and she was awake, staring at the ceiling with her nightlight throwing stars across it, and she said, "Daddy, are you sad?" Kids know. They always know. I sat on the edge of her bed and I said, "No, baby, I'm not sad. It was a great birthday. Thank you for my crown." And she was quiet for a second. And then she said the thing. She said, "Daddy, I love you. But sometimes I wish Marcus was my real dad, because he lets me stay up late and he took me to the aquarium and he said I could call him Daddy Marcus if I wanted. I want you to understand that I didn't move. I have hung drywall in framed houses and fallen off a roof once, and I have never in my life held that still, because I didn't know who Marcus was. I had never heard the name. Not once in 6 years." And my daughter was saying it like it was ordinary, like it was a person she saw all the time, a person who took her to the aquarium, a place I had never taken her because Claire always said Lily got scared of the sharks. And I smiled. God help me. I smiled again. And I said, "The aquarium, huh? When did you go there, Bug?" And Lily yawned and said, "When you were at work. Mommy and Marcus and me, it's a secret. Mommy said don't tell Daddy because it's a surprise." A surprise. My 6-year-old thought she was keeping a birthday surprise. And I tucked her in, and I kissed her forehead, and I turned off the stars, and I went and stood in the hallway outside her door in the dark for what might have been 5 minutes or might have been an hour. Because the video was one thing, the video was a knife, but this was the floor of my whole life dropping out, because a man I'd never heard of had been taking my daughter to the aquarium and telling her to call him Daddy, and my wife had built the secret into our child. Let me tell you about Marcus, because I found out everything eventually. Marcus was Claire's ex from before me, the one she always described, on the rare times he came up, as a mistake I got out of just in time. I had pictured some loser. Turns out Marcus was not a loser. Marcus had done well. Marcus had a boat and a house on the water 2 towns over and a fiancé named Devin. And it was Devin, I would learn much later, who sent me that video because Devin found it on Marcus's tablet and Devin was not going to be lied to the way I was being lied to. But I didn't know any of that yet. That night, all I knew was 2 facts sitting side by side. My wife was sleeping with her ex, and my daughter loved him. And I lay down next to Claire at 1 in the morning, and she rolled over and put her arm across my chest in her sleep, and I stared at the ceiling, and I did the coldest thinking I've ever done in my life. Because here's what I understood. If I confronted her, she would cry. And she would say it was one time, and she would say it meant nothing, and she would delete everything, and she would coach Lily, and in 6 months it would be my word. And a video against a woman crying in a courtroom, and I could lose my daughter. That was the thought that turned me to stone. I could lose my daughter. Not to Marcus, to Claire. Because in this state, when a marriage ends, the kid goes with a mother 9 times out of 10, and I was not going to be the guy who sees his daughter every other weekend while a man named Marcus teaches her to call him Daddy in my absence. So I made a plan, and I know how it sounds. I know some of you are already saying, just talk to her, just have the conversation, and to you I say, you have never had this much to lose. I decided I was going to find out everything first. Everything. And I was going to do it quietly, and I was going to do it in a way that no crying and no coaching could undo. And only when I had all of it would I move. It took me 9 weeks. 9 weeks of being the same man on the outside. 9 weeks of eating breakfast with a woman I now watch the way you watch weather, looking for the turn. And I want to walk you through it because the things I found were so much bigger than a hotel room. The first thing I did was the boring thing. The thing that matters most and that nobody wants to hear. I called a lawyer, not to file anything, just to sit in an office and ask a man in a gray suit what I would need if this went the ugly way. And he told me 2 words that became my whole religion for 9 weeks. Document everything. Don't accuse, don't hint, don't change the locks, don't move money in a way a judge would call hiding it. Just quietly become the most documented father in the county. So I did. I started keeping Lily's schedule in my own hand. Every doctor's appointment I took her to. Every school pickup. I signed up to coach her soccer, which I'd been meaning to do for a year, and suddenly there was a paper trail a mile long of me being the involved parent, because the lawyer said custody isn't about who's angry, it's about who's the primary caregiver on paper. The second thing I did was harder. I opened a separate bank account, and I started very carefully and very legally keeping copies of our finances, because something in the back of my head had started itching. We made good money. I made good money. And yet we never seemed to have any. Every year the accounts were tight, and every year Claire had a reason. The roof, the car, Lily's preschool, and I had never once looked hard. Because I trusted her, because looking would have meant I didn't. So I looked. And what I found made me sit down on the floor of my own garage. Over 4 years, in small amounts, never big enough to trigger a question, Claire had moved a little over $60,000 out of our accounts. Some of it to a savings account I didn't know existed, and some of it, and this is the part that made my hands go cold all over again, some of it to Marcus. Payments to a man with a boat and a house on the water. My wife had been paying her ex with my money, and I would find out later it was because Marcus had a gambling problem the whole polished life covered up. And Claire, my Claire, was propping him up, funding the affair with the man she was betraying me with, out of the joint account that held the money I made framing houses in the July heat. $60,000. I want you to know, I didn't feel angry when I found it. That's the strange thing about going numb for weeks. The anger stops arriving on time. What I felt was almost relief, because now I understood the shape of it. This wasn't a woman who slipped once. This was a project. This was years. This was a whole second life running underneath the one I could see, funded and scheduled and hidden, with my daughter walked right through the middle of it to the aquarium. But before I get to the thing that saved me, I have to tell you about the phone, because the money told me the how, and the phone told me the how long, and the how long was the part that nearly put me in the ground. Our carrier keeps call and text logs you can pull online, and I sat in a parking lot outside a hardware store one afternoon on my lunch break, and I scrolled back through 2 years of one number, a number saved in her phone I later confirmed as Dana from book club, and there is no Dana. There was never a book club. There were 3, sometimes 4 calls a day to that number, calls at lunch, calls at 11 at night from the bathroom while I thought she was taking a bath, calls the morning of my birthday at 6:14 a.m. while she was frosting cupcakes. And I remembered standing in that doorway, watching her and feeling like the luckiest man I knew. And now I knew she'd been on the phone with him an hour before, planning God knows what, and I had to roll down the window of my truck in the parking lot because I thought I was going to be sick, right there on the steering wheel. 2 years, at least. Probably longer. The aquarium trips, the girl's weekends to her sister's that her sister later admitted. When it all came out, she'd been covering for. A whole architecture of small lies, each one so small I'd never have looked twice. And stacked together, they made a second marriage running silent underneath mine. And here's the thing I want anyone in this situation to hear, because it almost broke me and I don't want it to break you. When you find out it was years, not weeks, your first instinct is to hate yourself. To go back through every anniversary, every I love you, every night she reached for you, and reread all of it as a performance, and to feel like a fool in your own memories. I spent a bad week there. A really bad week. I'd look at a photo of the 3 of us at the beach and feel like it was a photo of a con. But my lawyer, who turned out to be part therapist, told me something I've held on to. He said, don't let her rewrite the past on top of the present. Some of it was real to you, and that's yours. She doesn't get to take that too. And he was right. The love I felt was real, even if hers was a lie, and a real thing done by me is not made fake by a lie told by her. And once I understood that, I stopped drowning and started building. There was one night in those weeks I came closer to blowing the whole plan than I ever admitted to anyone. I'd printed a stack of the bank records to bring to the lawyer, and I'd hidden them in the garage inside a box of old tile. And I came home late from a job, and Claire was standing in the garage with the light on, and the box was open on the workbench, and my heart stopped so hard, I felt it in my teeth. She turned around holding a grout float and said, "Do we still have the spacers for the bathroom? I want to finally do that backsplash." She was looking for tile, just tile. The records were still folded inside a manila envelope taped to the underside of the lid, and she'd moved the whole box to get to the trowels and never opened the lid. And I stood there and heard myself say, in a completely normal voice, "Yeah, they're in the blue bin. I'll grab them this weekend." And she smiled and kissed my cheek and went inside to plan a backsplash for a house she was scheming to take half of. And I sat down on an overturned bucket in my own garage and shook for 10 minutes. That's what these weeks are like. If you're in one, you will smile in the exact second your whole body is screaming. You will hand her the tile spacers, and it will feel like lying. And you'll wonder if being able to do it makes you as bad as her, and I'm here to tell you it doesn't, because a lie told to protect your child from a landmine is not the same species as a lie told to plant one. So, the thing that saved me, the third thing I did was the thing I'm least proud of, and the thing that saved me. And I've gone back and forth on whether to even say it, but I promised you the truth. I put a voice-activated recorder in her car. Check your own laws. I check mine. In my state, one party to a conversation can consent to recording it. And there's a wrinkle about the car being marital property. My lawyer walked me through exactly what would and wouldn't be usable, and I'm not going to pretend it was clean, but I needed to know what she was saying when she thought I couldn't hear, because I had a daughter to fight for. And for 3 weeks, I got nothing but her singing along to the radio and yelling at traffic, and I started to feel like a criminal. And then one Thursday, I got 11 minutes that I have never been able to forget. She was on the phone with Marcus. And they weren't whispering love to each other. They were doing something worse. They were planning. Marcus was pushing her to leave me. And Claire, my wife, the woman who threw me a birthday party, said, and I am quoting her exactly because it is burned into me, I can't yet, not till the house is refinanced in both names. Once it's in both names, I take half, and we're set. Just be patient. He has no idea. He's the most clueless man alive. He has no idea. He's the most clueless man alive. And then she laughed. That same comfortable laugh from the hotel video. And she said, the best part is, he thinks Lily hung the moon for him. He's such a good dad. You're such a good dad. She'd said it to me in the doorway on my birthday. And she said it to Marcus in the car as a punchline. And that was the moment, if you want to know, that the numbness finally broke. Not into anger, but into something clearer and colder than anger. Something that felt almost like peace. Because now I had it. All of it. The video. The money. The plan to strip me of my house. Her own voice calling me clueless. And my daughter, a prop. And I realized she had told me her whole strategy. She was waiting on the refinance, so all I had to do was not refinance. And move first. And move completely. There was a dinner in the middle of all this that I still can't quite believe I sat through. Claire's parents came over, the way they did once a month. And her father, a big warm man who genuinely loved me, who taught me to fish and called me son, sat at my table and asked me how work was, and told me I looked tired and said, you take care of my girl. You hear? And I looked at my father-in-law, who had no idea his daughter was 3 weeks from trying to take my house. And I said, always. And I meant it about him. He didn't deserve what was coming any more than I did. And later, when it all broke, he called me and apologized with his voice cracking. This 65-year-old man apologizing for his grown daughter and told me that whatever happened, I was still his family and Lily was still his granddaughter, and he hoped to God I'd let him stay in her life. And I said, of course, always, because he never lied to me, only she did. That dinner, though, Claire made a roast. She told a funny story about Lily at the grocery store. She reached over and squeezed my hand across the table when her mother said what a lovely home we'd built, and I squeezed back, and the recorder in the car had 11 minutes of her calling me clueless, and I looked around that table at people I loved and thought, only 2 of us at this table know the truth, and she thinks she's the only one. That was the strangest power I've ever held, and I want to be honest, part of me hated holding it because I'm not a schemer by nature. I build things. I like a level and a square and a thing that's either plumb or it isn't, and living inside a lie, even to escape one, costs you something. I lost 15 pounds in those 9 weeks. I stopped sleeping right. My brother, the only person I'd told, would text me at midnight just to say you okay, and half the time I wasn't, but I'd type back yeah and put the phone down and stare at the woman next to me. There was also the night I almost ran into Marcus in the flesh, and it's the closest I came to throwing the whole plan away for the pleasure of one punch. Lily had a school thing, a little spring concert, and I was there, of course, front row, camera out, and across the gym, standing near the back door like he had any right to breathe that air, was a man I'd only ever seen from the shoulder up in a hotel video, and I knew him instantly. Marcus. He'd come to my daughter's concert. Claire didn't know I'd clocked him. She was next to me clapping, and Lily, up on the risers in her little white shirt, scanned the crowd and found him, and she waved, this small, secret happy wave, at the man my wife was paying with my money, and something in my chest went to a temperature I didn't know a body could reach. I could have crossed that gym in 10 seconds. I wanted to. Every cell wanted to. And I sat in that folding chair and I filmed my daughter singing about springtime, and I did not move. Because my lawyer's voice was in my head saying, the man who throws the punch loses the custody, and I was not going to trade my daughter for the satisfaction of a bloody nose, his or mine. He left before the lights came up. I never did get to hit Marcus, and these days I'm glad, because a punch would have been over in a second, and what I did instead lasted. Now here is where I have to tell you about Lily, because everything I did next, I did with one rule. And the rule was that my daughter would never carry a single ounce of this. Whatever Claire had done, Lily was 6, and Lily loved her mother, and Lily also, God help her, loved a man named Marcus, who was going to vanish from her life. And none of that was Lily's fault, and I was not going to be a second adult who used her as a weapon. So while I built the case, I built something else too. I became, quietly, the safest place in her world. I read to her every night. I learned to braid hair off a video, badly, and she laughed at me and let me keep trying. I told her, without ever saying a word against her mother, over and over in 100 small ways, that no matter whatever happened, her dad was not going anywhere, that some grown-ups come and go, but I was the forever kind. I was planting a flag in her so deep that when the storm came, and it was coming, she would have one thing she never had to doubt. And I need to say this to any parent listening who's in the middle of their own version of this. The evidence matters, yes. Get the evidence, but the thing that actually wins is being the calm one. Kids don't remember the custody arrangement. They remember who was steady. Be the steady one. The 9th week, I met with my lawyer for the last time before we moved, and I laid it all out on his conference table, the printed statements, the transfer records, the schedule in my handwriting, the soccer rosters, the transcript of 11 minutes in a car, and the video that started it all, and he looked at all of it for a long, quiet time, and then he took off his glasses and said, "In 15 years, I have rarely seen a file this clean. Do you understand what you have here?" And I said no. And he said, "You have everything, and she has nothing. And she doesn't know it yet, and that is the only advantage that matters. Don't waste it on a fight in your kitchen." So we didn't fight in the kitchen. Here's what we did instead. On a Wednesday, while Claire was at the gym, my lawyer filed custody petition, emergency motion, the works, with the financial evidence attached, the whole documented life of a father who'd been the primary caregiver on paper for 2 months, and honestly, in his heart for 6 years. I moved half of the remaining joint money into an account the court was notified about. Legally, transparently the opposite of hiding, and I sat down that afternoon and I did the hardest thing in the whole 9 weeks. I called Devin, Marcus's fiancée, the woman who sent the video. I'd figured out it was her weeks earlier from the number. And I told her everything I had, the money especially, the $60,000 flowing to the man she was about to marry. And there was a long silence on the line, and then she said, "The boat." He told me the boat money came from his business. And I said no. It came from mine, and that was the end of Marcus and Devin, and it was the end of Marcus's easy-funded life, because Devin was the one with the family money, and Devin was done. I didn't do that for revenge. I want to believe that. I did it because she'd warned me, and she deserved to not marry a man on my dime. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like something landing where it belonged. Claire came home from the gym to a text from my lawyer's office, and a very different house. I wasn't there. That was the plan, too. I was at my brother's with Lily, who thought we were having a fun sleepover. And I had my phone off because the lawyer said, "Do not engage. Do not give her a single word she can twist. Let the paper speak." And the paper spoke. She called 40 times. She called my brother. She called my mother. She cried to everyone. And the story she told everyone was that I'd lost my mind, that I was paranoid, that I'd made it all up. And for about a day, it almost worked. Because she is good. She is so good. She frosted cupcakes on my birthday while planning to take my house. And then her own lawyer saw the file. And I'm told, secondhand, that her lawyer called her into his office and closed the door and asked her one question, whether the voice on the recording was hers. And she said yes before she thought about it. And that was that. There was no trial. There almost never is, when one side has everything. There were months of ugly negotiation. And I won't pretend it was clean or fast or that I slept well. But when the dust cleared, I had primary custody of my daughter. The house stayed mine and mine alone. The $60,000 was accounted for in the settlement, and Claire got exactly what she'd tried to engineer for me, which was to start over with much less than she thought she had. And Marcus, last I heard, moved away, broke, alone, the boat sold, and my daughter has not asked about him in a long time, because the thing about a 6-year-old is that the forever kind of love, the kind you plant deep, is the kind that stays, and the come-and-go kind fades like a nightlight in the morning. I need to tell you the last part, because I know some of you have been waiting the whole time for the question I was most afraid of, the one that lived under everything, and it's the question the title of this whole nightmare put in your head. If Marcus was in our lives that deeply, for that long, was Lily even mine? I sat with that terror for weeks, and when the custody was settled and the worst was over, I did the test. Quietly. Not because it would change how I felt. I had already decided nothing on earth could make me less her father, but because I needed to walk into the rest of my life without a ghost in the doorway. And she's mine. Biologically, legally, in every way there is, she is mine. And I cried in a parking lot holding a piece of paper. Not because it would have mattered if it said something else, but because the last thread of Claire's story, the one where I was the clueless man who didn't even know his own child, was finally completely dead. The months of negotiation were their own kind of war, and I want to tell you about them because the internet loves the clean knockout and real life is messier, and I promised you the truth. Once Claire understood the file was real, she stopped crying to my family and started fighting dirty. And the dirtiest thing she tried was Lily. There was a stretch of about 6 weeks before the custody was locked, where we were still trading days. and Lily would come back from her mother's saying things that weren't hers. 6-year-olds don't say daddy's trying to keep us apart. 6-year-olds don't say you made mommy cry, and now we might lose the house. Those were Claire's words in Lily's mouth. And it was the one thing in all of this that nearly made me lose the calm I'd guarded so hard, because I could take being called clueless and I could take the $60,000, but I could not take her using our daughter as a script. And here's what I did, and I'd tell any parent to do the same. I didn't defend myself to a 6-year-old. I didn't say your mother is lying. I got down on the floor at her level and I said, that sounds scary. Grown-up stuff is confusing sometimes, and it is never, ever your job to fix it. Your only job is to be 6. And no matter what any grown-up says, in this house or any house, your dad loves you and your dad is not going anywhere. And you can ask me that 100 times and the answer will always be the same. And she asked me 100 times for weeks, every night, are you going anywhere? And 100 times I said, no, baby, I'm the forever kind. And slowly the scripts stopped coming, because a script is just words, and steadiness is a thing a kid can feel in her body, and mine could feel it. The lawyer told me later that the guardian ad litem, the person the court sends to figure out what's best for the child, wrote in her report that Lily was notably more regulated and secure in the father's care. And I know that's cold clinical language, but I read that sentence in a lawyer's office and had to look at the ceiling for a second, because it was the whole 9 weeks and the whole 6 months in one line, the steady one wins. When the settlement finally signed, Claire and I were in the same room for the first time in months, at a long table with our 2 lawyers, and she looked older and tired. And for 1 second, I felt something almost like grief for the person I'd thought she was. The cupcake frosting person who never actually existed. She signed her name. I signed mine. And that was the marriage, ended not with a scream in a kitchen, but with 2 ballpoint pens and a notary. Exactly the way my lawyer said it should. Quiet and complete, and impossible to undo. She tried to catch my eye on the way out. I've thought about why. Maybe an apology. Maybe one more angle. I'll never know. Because I was already looking at my phone, at a photo of Lily in her soccer uniform I'd made my lock screen, and I walked out of that building into an ordinary afternoon, a free man with his daughter, and I did not look back. Not because I'm hard, but because everything I wanted was in front of me. Lily is 9 now. She hung a paper crown on my wall that she made me 4 birthdays ago, and I have never taken it down. Her mother sees her, supervised at first and now every other weekend. And I have never once said a bad word about Claire to her, because that flag I planted, the forever kind, only stays clean if I keep it clean. People ask me sometimes if I'm still angry, and the honest answer is no, not anymore, because anger is a thing you carry for the person who wronged you. And I set that down a long time ago on a lawyer's conference table. What I carry now is my daughter's backpack and her soccer bag, and the memory of the coldest, clearest 9 weeks of my life when I found out that the woman singing the loudest at my birthday was the one holding the knife, and I chose, instead of screaming, to be quiet and to be steady and to win. I was blowing out the candles when my phone buzzed against my leg, and I have thought 1,000 times about the man who almost didn't open that video. And I want to tell him, across all these years, open it, son, open it, because the truth was the worst gift I ever got, and it was also the only one that ever set me free. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Wishing you all the best. Stay healthy and take care.